You can see it really well here on this one. Okay, so we've got, here, let me pull up a diagram here. Okay, so up here on the front, okay, we've got the frontalis muscle. Okay, so the frontalis muscle is the muscle that allows you to raise your eyebrows. Okay, so that's your frontalis. We then have two muscles which have a unique structure to them. So the orbicularis oculi and the orbicularis oris are unique because its origin and insertion is upon itself. Hank talked about it a little bit in his video, but we'll talk about it a little bit more, right? So muscles have to have at least two attachment points to bone, right? So we call one the origin and one's the insertion. The origin is the less movable end, and the insertion is the more movable end. So for example, your biceps brachii, its origins are on the shoulder. It's got two origins on the shoulder. So it's got one on the supraglenoid tubercle and then the coracoid process, and it inserts into the radial tuberosity of the radius. When muscles contract, they move insertion towards origin. So when you contract your biceps brachii, you're pulling the insertion towards the origins. Okay? In the case of the orbicularis oris and the orbicularis oculi, the origin and insertion is the same spot because they're circular muscles. So the orbicularis oculi is the muscle that allows you to do this. So when you open and close your eyes, that's your orbicularis oris. Your orbicularis oculi is the main muscle that allows you to, right? So if you're a Kardashian, you've got extremely well developed orbicularis oris muscles, okay? And then one other muscle we will talk about is the zygomaticus. So the zygomaticus is right here on your cheek. It's one of the muscles that helps you smile. And then the masseter, which is right here on the side of the cheek, that's your primary biting muscle. So when you bite down on something, that's your masseter muscle that you see right there. Okay? So those are the muscles of the face that we're going to talk about. There's a whole bunch of other ones that are on there. So for example, we've got the levator labii superioris, and then we've got the levator labii superioris aliqui nasi. So these are muscles that oftentimes get adjusted. So as we get older, we start to get those folds here, we call them labial folds. So if you get a facelift, right, that's one of the muscles that we'll mess with. Some people have extremely well controlled or ability to control their levator labii superioris aliqui nasi. Can anybody here flare their nostrils? So if you can flare your nostrils, you can control your levator labii superioris aliqui nasi muscles. So you're going to get all associated with these muscles here in a couple of years. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's go on to some of the muscles of the neck. We're going to get into these in greater detail. Okay. So the big bad boy of the neck that we're going to focus on is the muscle right here on the side of your neck. This is called the sternocleidomastoid. So you see this big, large rope-like muscle here on the side of your neck. Did you find it? Okay. So it's right here on the neck. You guys can actually palpate this. So kind of right here. Now turn your head.
Away?
Either side. You feel it. So if you want to palpate on your side, turn to the side that you're on. You can feel that muscle contract.
What is it called?
It's called the sternocleidomastoid. So it starts on the sternum and it attaches to the mastoid process on your head, right? So it's called the sternum because it's where the sternum and the clavicle meet, so here, okay? So when you contract one, it rotates your head. When you contract both, it flexes your head. It's one of the large muscles, of the main muscles of your neck. So we'll talk about that one, and then the other one we will talk about. You can't see it very well on here, but it's called the platysma. So the platysma is here in the front of your neck. So go like this. Right, that's your platysma right there, right? So as we get older, right, we start to get that turkey neck thing going on. So if you go in and go see a oral maxillofacial surgeon for cosmetic surgery, they will actually cut the platysma and then stretch it up there and reattach it so no more turkey neck. Huh? Platysma, P-L-A-T-Y-S-M-A. Here, let me pull it up for you.
So that's just over time, like as you age versus like weight loss, would you say, with like the turkey?
Well, weight loss can do it as well too. So that's the platysma right there. So surgery on would be called a platysmoplasty.
And there you go.
Right there, right? So you made your turkey neck, right? Got rid of some of the turkey neck.
It's a whole new world.
So yeah, so this is a common neck, this is a common procedure. We call it a neck lift. Dramatically reduce aging. So.
She looked like 16 kilos again.
I'm telling you guys want to make some buco bucks, become an oral maxillofacial surgeon, and then just specialize in facelifts. It's a lot of money. You don't want to look old. Okay. A lot of mean people out there. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the major muscles of the trunk. Okay, so first and foremost, we'll start with the anterior part of the shoulder girdle. Talk about the pectoralis major. Okay, its origins, and there are many, are basically it's on your sternum and your clavicle. Okay, and it's in what we call a penne or fan shape, and its origin is just past the greater tubercle of your humerus. Okay. Now, every muscle has an action or actions to it. So, for example, we talked about the frontalis. Its job is to lift the forehead, right? The orbicularis oculi closes the eyes. Orbicularis oris purses the lips. Sternocleidomastoid rotates and flexes the trunk. The pectoralis major does flexion, adduction, and internal rotation of the humerus. So, flexion, adduction, internal rotation. Okay? So, what would be a really effective exercise in order to target primarily the pectoralis major muscle?
Chest flies.
Any type of a movement where you're going like this. So, like flies, dumbbell flies, cable flies, anything like that. Bench press. Right? Most people don't know how to bench press properly, so most people, right, they're mostly working the shoulders and the arms when they do bench press. So it can be a really effective chest developing exercise, but most people don't lift properly to do it. So you're gonna get more bang for your buck, the average person, out of doing like, especially like a low cable fly, right? So you see the guys at the gym, they got the cables here, and they come up like this. So that's gonna target the pectoralis muscles probably better than the bench press for most people, and put less stress on your shoulder. So it's a very effective one there, okay? We've got the deltoid muscle, right? So deltoid muscle is called the deltoid muscle because it is triangularly shaped, and anybody who knows anything about sororities or fraternities knows that if you see a triangle, that's delta. Don't we have tri-delta any shape before? No? No. So we used to have a saying back in the day, tri-delta, everyone else has? I was not.
Oh.
I know, I look like a frat kind of person. I look like what you think of a frat guy looking like, but I was not in a fraternity. Okay? So Delta, right? So Delta Airlines, right? Delta Airlines got a triangle on it, right? So Delta is deltoid, right? So its origins are basically along the scapula and the clavicle, and inserts into that deltoid tuberosity about halfway down on your humerus. So it does flexion, abduction, and extension of the humerus, right? So the anterior fibers, right? So easy way to strengthen the anterior fibers. Number one, you can do raises, but bench, any type of pushing exercise, you're gonna really get the anterior, right? You're never gonna find somebody that goes to gym on a regular basis that doesn't have like decent like development of their anterior. Any type of pushing exercise can do that. So lateral delts, right? So any type of like raising action. Posterior delts, right? Any type of pulling action, you're gonna get the posterior delts. So they're not really that hard to get. Okay. Then we will talk about, okay, so let's talk about the serratus anterior. So the serratus anterior, you can see here on this guy, doing a supernatural pose. I mean, you see people at the, at the beach all the time, just, hanging out like this, supernatural pose. All right, so you can see this right here. So that's the serratus anterior muscle. What kind of knife would you call a steak knife or a bread knife?
Serrated.
We call it a serrated. It's like a saw-like action to it, right? So that's why it's called the serratus anterior, because it appeared to have what's called like a serrated edge, like a steak knife. Okay. So the function, the origin is on the ribs, and it inserts onto the lateral border of the scapula. It's called the boxer's muscle. Its function is to move the scapula this way. So if you go like this, right, like you're gonna hug somebody, your scapula is gonna move laterally, right? Or throw a punch, that's why it's called the boxer's muscle. So boxers are gonna have very well developed serratus anterior muscles, okay? Let's talk about the muscles of the abdomen. So there are 4 abdominal muscles. The outermost is called the rectus abdominis. The rectus abdominis, you can see here, is covered by a fibrous sheath called the linea alba. L-I-N-E-A-A-L-B-A, linea alba, okay? It subdivides the tissues of the rectus abdominis. Now, some of us have 4 subsections. Some of us have 6 subsections. Some of us have 8 subsections. Some of us have 10 subsections. Some of us have 12 subsections. Right, so it's going to be individually different to all of us. Its origin is on the pubic tubercle of the pubis, and it inserts into the xiphoid process of the sternum. Its job is to flex the trunk. Okay, so this is back extension. This is spinal flexion. Spinal extension, spinal flexion. So what's a really good way to exercise or strengthen the muscles of the rectus abdominis? Not sit-ups.
Crunches?
Crunches. So what are you doing with crunches? You're just simply crunching your spine, right? So sit-ups. What does sit-ups primarily work? So what are you doing when you do a sit-up? You lay all the way down and then you sit, come all the way up from into a seated position. So you are working the abdominal muscles, but you're also working a lot of the hip flexor muscles, right? So it is as much or more of a hip flexor exercise than it is a abdominal flexor, which is why more and more fitness tests for like police, military, they don't do sit-ups anymore, they do crunches or something else, right? Why would you want to do sit-ups? Why would you want to train sit-ups if it's not a great ab exercise? It's really good. It's really good at getting you into like a tuck or a pike position. So I can think of a couple people I would have do sit-ups. So number one, I'd have divers do it. What are divers doing? Like Olympic divers. They're getting into a tuck and a pike positions, right? So you got to be really strong to be able to get into that tuck or pike position. Number 2, gymnasts, right? The gymnasts are doing all stuff where they get into a tuck or a pike position. Number 3 would be anybody who's going to take a physical fitness test, where one of the tests in the exam is sit-ups, right? So like if you're trying out for the local police force and you have to do 25 sit-ups, there's only one way to get good at doing sit-ups, and that's doing sit-ups. So otherwise, do crunches. Crunches are better for your that. Okay. Then we have the internal and external obliques. So oblique means what, guys? It runs diagonal. Okay. So here's the difference between your internal and your external obliques. Your external obliques run this way, okay? So they start at your iliac crest and attach to your ribs. Your internal obliques start at your ribs and attach at your iliac crest. So they run in opposite directions. Okay, here's how your obliques work, okay? So this is the angle at which my right external oblique runs, okay? This is the angle that my left internal oblique runs. They're running the same direction, okay? This is the direction that my left external oblique runs, and this is the direction that my right internal oblique runs. You guys following me so far? Okay? Their job is to flex and rotate the trunk, okay? So they contract contralateral, okay? So if I contract my right external oblique, guess what's gonna fire to stabilize my head? My left internal. If I contract my left external, my right internal will also contract to help stabilize. So otherwise, if I just contract my left oblique, what's gonna happen? Right? That's gonna happen, right? Your pelvis is gonna get all out of whack, okay? So what type of exercises are going to strengthen the oblique muscles? The job is to rotate the trunk.
Russian twists.
So any type of twisting motion, so Russian twist, bad ball throws, all of that. So those are gonna be effective exercises. Here's one of the biggest pet peeves I have at the gym, okay? So you see people at the gym all the time, right, though, right? Mostly dudes, you see this with dudes a lot, right? So guy go over to the rack, pick up dumbbell, he'll do this. What's he trying to do? Where are this stuff coming from? Somebody hold it. What are they trying to do when they're lifting the dumbbell?
Bicep.
Well, yeah, but why? Why are they doing this?
Trying to take it to failure.
Why? What's the goal of going to the gym for most people?
To get bigger muscles.
Get bigger muscles, right? So and then, right, they'll then take that same dumbbell and they'll do this. Right? What are they trying to do? They're trying to make this area smaller, right? So why is it the same thing that's gonna make this bigger somehow gonna make this smaller? It's not. So you're talking about what's called spot reduction, okay? All right, so then underneath all of that, we've got this muscle here called the transverse abdominis, which runs, it's kind of like a girdle or like a weight belt, okay? So its job is to brace and stabilize your spine and your pelvis, okay? So here's an easy way to contract your transverse abdominis, okay? So suck in your gut. Pull your stomach in, hard as you can. That's your transverse abdominis. Okay, so that muscle kind of strengthens. Okay, let's talk about the back. Okay, so there's a couple muscles for the back. So number one, we've got the trapezius. It's roughly trapezoidal shape. Its job is to elevate, depress, and retract the scapula. So any type of movement where you're going like this, you're gonna activate the trapezius. And then we've got, underneath that, we've got the rhomboid muscles. So we've got the rhomboideus minor and the rhomboideus major. They're called the rhomboids because they are shaped like a rhombus. If you guys remember rhombuses from when you took geometry, in school. Okay. Their job is to retract the scapula. Okay. So any type of activity like that. So lat pull downs, rows, bent over rows, anything like that. And then we got the latissimus dorsi. Okay, its origin is here on the back of your pelvis, on the iliac crest of your pelvis, and it attaches here on your humerus. Its job is to extend, adduct, and internally rotate the humerus. So this type of motion. So swimmers, gymnasts, rock climbers, weightlifters, all will have very well developed latissimus dorsi muscles. So any type of this type of motion is going to get your latissimus dorsi quite well. Okay? So those are the main muscles that we're going to talk about for the back and the torso. Okay? All right, question for you guys. How do you guys get six-pack abs, visible six-pack abs?
Body fat percentage.
Body fat percentage, right? So you can do crunches from here till the cows come home. And it's not going to make one bit of difference as far as actually being able to see see your abdominal muscles. That's merely a factor of body fatness. We'll do the front of the leg first, and then we'll do the back of the leg. Okay, so front of the leg. Okay, so we've got a couple of different muscles on the front of the thigh. So first and foremost, we've got those muscles that we talked about up here. You can see at the very top the iliopsoas group. The iliopsoas group attaches to the back of your spine, and then it attaches onto the femur. Right? So its job is flexion, hip flexion, or if your legs are stationary, it'll flex the trunk. Okay? So these are the two muscles you're primarily working if you do things like leg lifts, hanging leg raises, sit-ups, stuff like that. You're mostly right. So people will say, well, I feel a burning sensation in my abdominal ring. Yeah, those muscles are underneath your abdominal muscles. You are working your abdominal muscles to some extent, but if you want to work the abs, like crunches are a better exercise to do than doing the leg lifts. Okay. Then we've got the sartorius. Okay. So the sartorius over here. This is the longest muscle in the body. Its origin is on top of the pelvis and inserts here onto the medial or onto the tubercle of the medial condyle of the tibia. Its job is to flex and externally rotate. So if you want to cross your leg, that's your sartorius muscle. Okay? Also known as the runner's muscle. It's highly well developed in runners. All right, then we've got the four muscles that make up primarily the thigh, called the quadricep muscles. Right? So quad means four. Anybody know what ceps means? From the Latin?
Seven?
Cep?
Seven?
What does it mean? C-E-P. So for example, squid and octopus are cephalopods. What's a cephalopod, guys? Literally means head, foot, because what do they have? A head and feet, right? If I have a problem with my feet, who might I go see?
Psychologist.
I might go see a podiatrist, right? If my baby's born with a bunch of cerebrospinal fluid around their head, they got a big megamind head, we would say that they have hydrocephaly, right? Something's wrong, like inflammation of your head, we might say you have encephalitis, right? So cep means head, okay? So four-headed muscle, right? So we've got the vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and then you can't see it, but deep underneath you have a muscle called the vastus intermedius, okay? So these three muscles extend the knee. That's knee extension, okay? The last one, the big daddy of the group, is this one right here, the rectus femoris, okay? So the rectus femoris is a two-joint muscle. Since it's a two-joint muscle, it has at least two different actions, right? It has to because it's a two-joint muscle, okay? So here are the two actions of the rectus femoris. Okay? So its origin is on the hip and it attaches onto the tibia. All right, so it does hip flexion, okay, and knee extension. Okay? So if you do knee extensions, okay, if you do knee extensions, you're primarily working the other three quadricep muscles, unless you lean back at least 20 degrees. 20 to 30 degrees back. Now you can also work the rectus femoris muscle. What's other ways to work the rectus femoris muscle?
Hip extension?
So it does hip extension. So if you take it at hip extension, what's a good way to exercise the rectus femoris? Squats. You can do lunges. You can do step-ups. One exercise that's particularly effective for hitting the rectus femoris and the quads in general is called a sissy squat. Anybody here done a sissy squat? Would you like to demonstrate a sissy squat? My legs are sore, so.
I'm in socks.
Yeah, so that's a sissy squat. Yeah, so it's very effective for hitting the. I don't know why they call it sissy squat because there's some. It's pretty tough exercise to do. So, Okay, so that's the
No
quadricep muscles, okay? And then, well, there's only really one on the shin that we're really gonna talk about, which is right here, the tibialis anterior or anterior tibialis, right? So it starts on the shin and then attaches onto your foot. Its job is to plantar flex. I'm sorry, dorsiflex. So when you point your toes up, that's dorsiflexion, that is your anterior tibialis. Its main function is to brake when you're running, right? So you run, what does your foot want to do? It wants to dorsiflex, right? And then your anterior tibialis brakes that motion, okay? What's the brakes on that motion? So that's where you get what's called shin splints. What's the best way to prevent shin splints, guys? Number one, stretch. Number two, do a thorough warm-up. Number three, run on a softer surface, right? So if you're just getting into running, number one, don't. Running's terrible.
Seriously?
Yeah. I remember, you guys remember that show,
Like
Parks
for
and Recs?
What?
One of the characters is like, I know running is so good for you, but at God, at what cost?
So is it good for you or is it like?
It can be, yeah, it is good for you, yeah. So, yeah, if you do it right, so make sure you're running, number one, learn how to run with good mechanics. Number two, wear good footwear. Number three, as much as you can, run on a soft surface, so a track, treadmill, right? Don't just go out on the pavement and just pound a bunch of miles out on the pavement. It's not good on your body. Okay, so let's talk about the muscles of the back of the thigh, and then we will get out of here for today, and we'll do some exercise physiology stuff next week. Okay, let's talk about one of the most important muscles of the body. So important, in fact, that there was once a song written about it that was a hit far and wide by a performer named Sir Mix-a-Lot. Let's talk about the gluteal muscles, the butt muscles. Okay, so there are three gluteal muscles. So we've got the gluteus minimus, medius, and maximus. So the medius, you can't really see it, but it's kind of here. Its primary job is to help kind of basically assist the gluteus maximus. The gluteus maximus's main job is to abduct, okay, and also prevent adduction, okay. And then we got the gluteus maximus. Gluteus maximus' job is to extend, abduct, and externally rotate. So extend, externally rotate, and abduct, okay? So this type of a motion, okay? So who's gonna have really well-developed gluteal muscles? Soccer players, sprinters, anybody that does some type of skating sport, right? So like, what's an ice skater doing? Like a speed skater doing? What are they doing? They're doing that motion, right? You want to see a butt you can bounce a quarter off of, go see it like a speed skater. They've got amazing gluteal development, okay? Okay. Then we've got the hamstring group, okay? So we've got three muscles that make up the hamstring group. We got the biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus, okay? So the semitendinosus, and then we got the semimembranosus, right? So the functions of the hamstrings are to do two things. Number one, flexes the knee. Number two, it also extends the hip, right? So it assists the gluteals in doing hip extension, okay? So you're at the gym, right? You want to train your glutes specifically. How do you train your glutes to ensure, what kind of exercise can you do to ensure that you're hitting the glutes and not hitting your hamstrings? They both are involved in hip extension.
It has to be adduction?
So you got to adduct. So ideally, right, you want to do three things, right? You want an exercise that's going to hip extend, externally rotate, and abduct, right? So like, I usually only see women doing this. Guys should do this too, like where you got the cable here and attach the ankle and you do those kind of motion. That actually hits the gluteal muscles pretty well, right? But so so here's a good way to ensure that you're not utilizing your hamstrings to do hip extension. So muscles got two joint muscles, got two actions, can do both actions well simultaneously. So hamstrings are primarily, their primary function is hip flexion or knee flexion, and then they also help assist with hip extension. So they can either do knee flexion or hip extension. They can't do both well at the same time. So any type of activity, extra movement where you are doing hip extension with a flexed knee is going to target the gluteal muscle specifically. So things like, you see like those hip thrusts that people do at the gym with the barbell on it. Or like, like the machine where you do the donkey kicks, anything like that. So those are exercises that are good at specifically making sure that you're targeting specifically the gluteal muscles, right? Hamstrings, super easy, right? Any type of exercise where you are flexing the knee. So leg curls, also like, so when you're here, right? So your hamstrings are contracting, so anything like that. So any type of squatting motion, like things like this, leg curls, anything like that's going to hit those really well. Okay, then we got two muscles, well, three muscles, but we're really just going to talk about two muscles here on the calf. So we've got the muscle that you can see here. This is called the gastrocnemius. So the gastrocnemius is that outer muscle, right? It looked to early anatomy as like two bellies. So that's why it's called the gastrocnemius. Directly underneath that, deep to that, is the soleus muscle. Okay, you go to the gym, you see two types of calf machines, right? You see a standing calf raise machine, and then a seated calf raise machine. Why do they have both? Just to shake it up and do something different? Like the different curling machines?
Targets different muscles?
It's targeting different muscles, okay? So the gastrocnemius is the primary plantar flexor of a extended knee. So when you're standing up, this is your gastrocnemius. When you're sitting down, the gastrocnemius is involved in two things. It's a plantar flexor and a weak knee flexor. So if your knee is flexed and then you do a calf raise, that's your soleus. So I see dudes all the time at the gym like trying to develop their gastrocnemius muscles, and they're doing a bunch of seated calf raises. That ain't gonna do diddly squat for your gastrocnemius muscle, because you're not working the right muscle. Okay? So if you want to work the outer calf, standing calf raises, or like if you're on a leg press machine, right, that kind of motion or anything like that. If you want to work the middle one, that's when you do the seated calf raises. Anybody gonna see things at the gym a little differently after this lecture?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're gonna see a bunch of people doing stuff. You're like, why are they doing that? So yeah, 'cause a lot of people, they understood what the muscles are intended to do, would do things quite a bit differently, right? So if you understand the muscle physiology, the kinesiology, it would make a lot more sense. Any questions on this material? No? Okay, we'll go over this a little bit more detail on Thursday. And then Thursday, we'll do some exercise physiology stuff. So Thursday, guys, is your guys' day to ask me any and all questions about like fitness and exercise and working out and all of that. So that's your guys' day to ask all of those questions. Not that you can't other times, but that's especially appropriate.